Do you remember the simple, hearty meals families relied on in the 1950s? These were the dishes that made a little stretch far, turning modest ingredients into filling, comforting dinners. Every plate told a story of frugality, creativity, and care, feeding hungry families without breaking the grocery budget. Today, we're revisiting 30 of these classic meals, celebrating the ingenuity and flavor of a bygone era in home cooking. Classic meatloaf with ketchup glaze. If there was one dish that summed up the 1950s dinner table, it was meatloaf. Every home had its own version, passed down clipped from a magazine, or improvised with whatever the pantry had left.
Called country meatloaf. This is a recipe.
Ground beef was cheap, filling, and forgiving, perfect for stretching into a meal that could feed a family of 6 with just a pound or two. Add a few breadcrumbs, an egg, and a splash of milk, and you had dinner magic. But the true star of the show was that sweet, tangy ketchup glaze, brushed on thick, caramelized just enough to make the edges sticky and irresistible. For many families, meatloaf wasn't just dinner. It was routine, ritual, and reassurance. It showed up on Monday nights or after Sunday church, served alongside mashed potatoes and canned green beans. There was comfort in its simplicity. No fancy ingredients, no surprises, just the familiar scent of baking beef and onions filling the kitchen. Some home cooks swore by adding Worcestershire sauce or a handful of oats instead of breadcrumbs, while others stretched it even further with grated carrots or torn-up bread soaked in milk. By the time it hit the table, the loaf had done its duty, feeding everyone and leaving just enough for cold meatloaf sandwiches the next day. Kids might have groaned about it back then, but as adults, they remember that humble slice with something close to affection. Today, meatloaf is having a quiet comeback. Comfort food for uncertain times. Whether dressed up with artisan ketchup or baked just like Grandma did, it still carries that same old-fashioned promise. A warm meal made from simple things, with love baked right in. Creamed chipped beef on toast. In the 1950s, cream chipped beef on toast was both a budget meal and a national institution. Born out of wartime necessity and military mess halls, it somehow found its way onto suburban breakfast tables where it became known, affectionately or not, as SOS.
Creamed chipped beef on toast, sometimes called SOS.
You didn't need much to make it. A jar of dried beef, a bit of flour, butter, and milk. Mix it all together in a pan until it turned into a thick, creamy gravy. Then pour it over crisp toast or, if you were feeling fancy, a bed of mashed potatoes. It wasn't glamorous, but it filled bellies, stretched a dollar, and kept families satisfied on cold mornings. For many, this dish carried a taste of home in an era of rebuilding and routine. Housewives could pull it together in under 10 minutes, and it made use of pantry staples that lasted for months. Ideal for those tightening grocery budgets or avoiding waste. The salty, savory flavor of the chipped beef mixed with the rich white sauce created something unexpectedly comforting. The kind of stick-to-your-ribs meal that lingered in memory long after the plates were cleared. Kids might have wrinkled their noses at the look of it, but they rarely turned down a second slice of toast to mop up the sauce. In a time when convenience foods were starting to enter the market, this dish stayed true to its practical roots. Simple, reliable, and easy to love once you got past its plain appearance. Today, you might find it reimagined with smoked beef, cream, or sourdough bread, but the heart of it remains unchanged. Creamed chipped beef on toast is proof that even the humblest recipes can survive generations, not because they were fancy, but because they simply worked. Tuna casserole with crushed potato chips. Few dishes scream mid-century comfort food quite like tuna casserole with crushed potato chips.
Tuna casserole.
It was the ultimate pantry meal. a creamy, bubbling mix of canned tuna, condensed soup, egg noodles, and a crunchy golden topping that made dinner time feel special, even when it wasn't payday. This was the kind of dish a 1970s mom could whip up in minutes, using what she already had on hand. A can of tuna, a can of cream of mushroom soup, a splash of milk, and whatever noodles were in the cupboard. That was all it took to make something hot, hearty, and filling. But the real magic was in the topping. Those crushed potato chips gave every bite a salty crunch that felt just indulgent enough to make a humble casserole feel like a treat. Some moms added frozen peas or a sprinkle of shredded cheese to stretch it further, while others kept it plain and honest. Either way, it was dependable, the kind of dinner that brought everyone to the table fast. Tuna casserole wasn't just a meal, it was a symbol of frugality and creativity. It told the story of mothers who could turn a few cans and a bag of chips into something that smelled like love and tasted like home. Sure, the kids might have groaned when they saw it again on Thursday night, but the first bite usually won them over. Today, it's a dish that carries the nostalgia of Pyrex pans and avocado green kitchens, a time when comfort food didn't need to impress anyone but the family. Tuna casserole with crushed potato chips remains a classic reminder that the best dinners weren't expensive. They were simply made with care and maybe a little crunch. Chicken a la king. Once upon a stovetop in the 1950s, chicken a la king was the epitome of elegance on a budget. Creamy, savory, and just fancy enough to feel like a restaurant meal made right at home. It was the kind of dish that looked impressive, but secretly relied on pantry shortcuts. Leftover chicken, canned mushrooms, and a can or two of condensed cream soup, all ladled over toast points, rice, or biscuits. It wasn't just dinner. It was Mom's way of saying, "We may not eat out, but we eat well." The origins of chicken a la king go back to the early 1900s, but by the 1950s, it became a household staple thanks to the convenience craze. Home cooks loved its versatility. You could stretch a single chicken breast into a meal for 4 just by adding a creamy sauce and a starch underneath.
Showing you how to make chicken a la king.
It was rich without being wasteful and comforting without being complicated. Those glossy, velvety sauces were made with butter, milk, and a little confidence, the kind that came from years of making do. For families on tight budgets, it was a lifesaver. Leftover Sunday chicken became Monday's chicken a la king, transforming scraps into something new and satisfying. Served in those pastel kitchen bowls or over a bed of rice from the pressure cooker, it felt like a small luxury in a modest week. Today, chicken a la king lives on as one of those forgotten comfort foods that deserves a comeback. It's proof that thrift and flavor can happily share the same plate. A creamy, comforting relic of a time when a good meal wasn't about extravagance, but about ingenuity and heart. Beef and noodle casserole. If the 1950s had a signature smell, it might just be this: the bubbling aroma of beef and noodle casserole wafting from an oven lined with Pyrex. This was the dish that worked overtime for busy families.
Beef noodle casserole.
Turning humble ground beef, a handful of egg noodles, and a can or two of condensed soup into something that felt hearty and home-cooked. It was the kind of recipe that didn't need measuring cups or a cookbook, just a sense of thrift and a dash of love. The beauty of this casserole was its flexibility. Moms could swap ingredients depending on what the pantry offered: cream of mushroom or tomato soup, peas or corn, maybe even a sprinkle of cheddar on top if the budget allowed. Everything got tossed together, baked until bubbly, and served straight from the dish. No frills, no waste. Just pure comfort layered under a golden crust of melted cheese or crispy noodles. For many families, it was more than a meal. It was a reminder that simplicity could still feel special. Served alongside buttered bread or a side of canned green beans, this dish stretched every dollar without skimping on flavor. And somehow it always tasted better the next day, reheated for lunch or tucked into a thermos for Dad's work shift. Today, beef and noodle casserole feels like a postcard from a time when the family table was the heart of the home. It's proof that good cooking doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to fill bellies, warm hearts, and make everyone at the table feel like they've got enough. Spam and eggs breakfast supper. In the 1950s, Spam wasn't just a canned curiosity, it was a kitchen hero.
I make my spam and eggs.
When grocery budgets were tight and meat prices high, a single can of Spam could stretch across multiple meals. But one of the most beloved ways to use it came at the end of a long day. Spam and eggs breakfast supper. It was the kind of meal that blurred the lines between breakfast and dinner, reminding families that comfort didn't follow a schedule. Cubes or slices of Spam hit the skillet first, sizzling until their edges crisped and browned. Then came the eggs, scrambled, fried, or folded into a fluffy omelet, cooked right in the same pan, soaking up every bit of that salty flavor. Some families added onions or a handful of diced potatoes if they had them, turning it into a hearty hash. A few even topped it with ketchup or a spoonful of cheese sauce, the 1950s version of elevated plating. There was something wonderfully no-nonsense about this dish. It didn't require fancy ingredients, just a frying pan, a can opener, and an appetite. It was practical, filling, and dependable. The kind of meal that could make even a midweek supper feel like a small celebration. Looking back, Spam and Eggs Breakfast Supper captures the spirit of post-war American cooking. Resourceful, a little quirky, and full of heart. It's easy to imagine kids gathered around the table in their pajamas, the smell of fried Spam lingering in the air, and a parent saying, "Breakfast for dinner tonight." Sometimes the best meals aren't planned. They're just made with what you've got and shared with the people you love. Shepherd's pie with canned veggies. There was something wonderfully practical about the 1950s version of shepherd's pie. It wasn't the elegant kind you'd find in a British cookbook. It was a thrifty, all-American casserole layered with canned vegetables, instant mashed potatoes, and whatever ground meat happened to be on sale that week. For many families, this dish was less about tradition and more about making dinner happen with what was already in the pantry. It started with a skillet of browned ground beef or leftover roast, seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and maybe a splash of Worcestershire sauce if the bottle wasn't empty. Then came the magic of the canned goods: peas, carrots, corn, sometimes even green beans, all drained and stirred in to add color and bulk. Everything was spooned into a baking dish and topped with a thick layer of mashed potatoes, whipped smooth from a box of instant flakes or made from scratch if time allowed. Baked until golden and bubbling, shepherd's pie with canned veggies came out of the oven as a one-dish wonder, hearty, filling, and guaranteed to feed everyone at the table. It was a meal that felt both humble and heroic, proof that comfort food didn't need a fresh garden or a big budget. Today, this dish still carries that same spirit of homey resourcefulness. Sure, we might swap canned peas for frozen or add a sprinkle of cheese on top, but the heart of it remains the same. It's the taste of family dinners where nothing was wasted and every bite reminded you that love, like mashed potatoes, can stretch further than you think. Liver and onions, whether you liked it or not. Ah, yes, the 1950s dinner that divided households. Liver and onions. For some, it was a weekly staple loaded with iron and good intentions. For others, it was the reason they learned to hide peas in their napkins.
Liver and onions, y'all. Okay?
Either way, it was one of those dishes every family knew, whether they loved it or dreaded the smell of it frying in the pan. It usually started with a pound of beef or calf's liver, sliced thin and dredged in flour. The sizzle in the skillet was unmistakable, soon joined by the sweet caramel aroma of onions sautéing in butter. For thrifty homemakers, this wasn't just dinner. It was nutrition on a budget. Liver was cheap, packed with vitamins and endorsed by every 1950s nutrition pamphlet that promised it would keep your family strong. The onions helped mellow its strong flavor, or at least tried to. It was often served with mashed potatoes and a thick brown gravy to make it go down a little easier. Some families swore by soaking the liver in milk to soften the taste. Others just gritted their teeth and called it character building. One thing's for sure, no child ever forgot the night liver and onions hit the table. Looking back, liver and onions represent a kind of no-nonsense practicality that defined post-war cooking. It wasn't glamorous, but it reflected a time when nutrition mattered as much as taste, and nothing went to waste. Today, it's become a nostalgic relic, a dish that sparks either fond smiles or dramatic shudders. Love it or not, it's a reminder that even the most polarizing meals have a story worth remembering. Scalloped potatoes with ham.
Potatoes with ham.
Oh, it's so creamy.
If there was one dish that smelled like comfort and thrift rolled into one, it was scalloped potatoes with ham. This creamy, bubbling casserole was the perfect way for 1950s homemakers to stretch a small amount of leftover meat into a meal that fed a whole family. A little ham went a long way when it was layered between thinly sliced potatoes, onions, and a homemade or canned cream sauce that baked into golden perfection. The magic started with the basics. Peeled potatoes sliced paper thin, maybe with a hand-cranked slicer or just a steady knife. A bit of diced ham, left over from Sunday's dinner or a holiday roast, got tucked between the layers. Then came the sauce, milk thickened with flour and butter, sometimes boosted with condensed soup if convenience won out that day. Poured over the potatoes, it baked into something rich and filling, the kind of meal that made plain ingredients feel indulgent. Served with canned green beans or a simple salad, scalloped potatoes with ham wasn't just dinner. It was the definition of home cooking. It warmed the kitchen, filled the bellies, and turned leftovers into something everyone looked forward to. For many, it was a weeknight classic, a cozy reminder that the best meals weren't about abundance, but about cleverness. Even now, this dish holds up beautifully. Modern versions might add cheese or swap in smoked ham for extra flavor, but the heart of it hasn't changed. It's still about making something special from what's on hand, a lesson every frugal cook from the 1950s already knew by heart. A bubbling casserole dish, a wooden spoon, and the smell of potatoes baking. Sometimes, that's all it takes to make a house feel like home. Creamed corn casserole.
This is going to be beautiful on your Christmas table.
Simple, sweet, and comforting. Creamed corn casserole was one of those 1950s dishes that didn't need fancy ingredients to win everyone over. It was the definition of a church potluck classic before that phrase even existed. All it took was a couple of cans of corn, a few eggs, some milk, and a scoop of flour or cornmeal to bind it together. Baked until golden and slightly puffed, it walked the delicious line between side dish and dessert, thanks to its naturally sweet corn flavor and buttery aroma that filled the whole kitchen. For many homemakers, this dish was a lifesaver. When the grocery budget was tight, corn, canned or creamed, stretched far and cost little. It was shelf-stable, reliable, and always ready to turn into something warm and filling. Some families jazzed it up with a pinch of sugar or shredded cheese. Others poured it straight into a Pyrex dish just as it was. No matter the version, the result was always the same: a soft, custardy bake that paired perfectly with ham, roast chicken, or even meatloaf night. It wasn't just food, it was the taste of Sunday dinners and neighborhood gatherings. The kind of dish that reminded everyone of simpler times when recipes didn't come from magazines but from handwritten cards passed between friends. Today, you'll still find creamed corn casserole making appearances at Thanksgiving tables and family reunions, often under the name corn pudding. The ingredients haven't changed much, and honestly, they don't need to, because some recipes like this one prove that the best comfort food doesn't need reinventing. It just needs to be baked until golden, scooped with love, and served with the sound of laughter around the table. Beans and franks.
My favorite for franks and beans is Hebrew National's bun length.
Few meals summed up 1950s thrift and simplicity quite like beans and franks. It was the working family's go-to dinner. Cheap, filling, and surprisingly satisfying. With a can of baked beans, a few hot dogs, and a bit of ketchup or molasses, you had a meal that tasted like comfort even when the grocery budget was tight. Every spoonful carried that smoky sweet flavor that made you forget how little it cost to make. This dish had humble roots, born out of the Great Depression and carried proudly into the post-war years. Families needed hearty meals that stretched $1, and this one did it beautifully. Hot dogs were inexpensive, easy to slice, and kid-approved, while the beans provided protein and warmth. Everything simmered together in one pan until the sauce thickened and caramelized slightly at the edges, filling the kitchen with that unmistakable scent of something good's cooking. It wasn't fancy, but that was the point. Beans and franks fit right in beside white bread, mustard, and a glass of milk. It was an honest, everyday dinner, the kind of meal served on TV trays during black and white sitcom nights, when families gathered to laugh, eat, and unwind together. Even today, it's hard not to feel nostalgic when a pot of beans and franks bubbles on the stove. Modern versions might use smoked sausage or gourmet baked beans, but the heart of the dish remains the same. Simple food that feeds both hunger and memory. It's proof that sometimes the best dinners come from a can, a skillet, and a little creative stretching of what you've got. Because in the 1950s, a meal didn't need to be fancy. It just needed to be shared. Macaroni and cheese, from scratch or the box. If there was ever a dish that defined comfort in the 1950s kitchen, it was macaroni and cheese. Whether it came from a bubbling casserole made with real cheddar and breadcrumbs or straight from the familiar blue box, this meal was pure, creamy happiness in every bite. It was the dish every kid loved and every mom could count on. A guaranteed way to bring everyone to the table, no matter how tight the week's budget was. In its homemade form, macaroni and cheese was a labor of love. Elbow pasta boiled to just the right tenderness, coated in a sauce of butter, flour, milk, and handfuls of grated cheese. The casserole would bake until the edges turned golden and crisp, filling the house with that cozy smell of bubbling dairy and carbs, the universal language of comfort. But even the boxed version had its own kind of magic. For many post-war families, convenience was the new luxury, and that bright orange cheese powder became a symbol of modern efficiency and childhood joy all at once. Mac and cheese wasn't just a dish, it was a safety net. When the pantry was bare or payday was still a few days away, there it was, dependable, inexpensive, and endlessly adaptable. You could toss in sliced hot dogs, canned tuna, or a few frozen peas, and somehow it always worked. Even now, this dish hasn't lost its charm. From gourmet versions with fancy cheeses to the nostalgic Kraft classic, macaroni and cheese remains the ultimate comfort food. It's warm, familiar, and reminds us that sometimes the simplest recipes, whether homemade or from the box, have the power to make us feel completely cared for. Deviled ham sandwiches. Back in the 1950s, The deviled ham sandwich was the unsung hero of the quick lunch or last-minute supper. Humble, spicy, and ready in minutes. Every mom had a little can of Underwood deviled ham tucked somewhere in the pantry, its red devil logo promising salvation when dinner needed to appear out of thin air. It wasn't fancy, but it was dependable. A creamy, tangy spread of minced ham, mayo, mustard, and a dash of pepper that turned plain white bread into something surprisingly satisfying. The beauty of deviled ham was its thrift and versatility. Leftover baked ham from Sunday's roast didn't go to waste. It got ground up and mixed with relish or a spoonful of vinegar for that deviled bite. The result was a sandwich that packed flavor without needing a long ingredient list or much time at the stove. Moms could make a plate full of them in minutes, cut into neat triangles for lunch boxes or served with a handful of potato chips for an easy family meal. There was a certain practicality and comfort in this kind of food. It spoke of a time when resourcefulness was part of the daily routine, when stretching leftovers was an art form and canned goods were a trusted ally. The tangy scent of deviled ham on soft white bread might not sound glamorous now, but it carried the simple promise of a full belly and a familiar taste of home. Today, it's a retro relic that deserves a little revival. Fancy charcuterie boards may come and go, but there's still something charming about that creamy, peppery filling between two slices of bread. A bite of 1950s ingenuity that still holds its own in the age of avocado toast. Stuffed cabbage rolls. In the 1950s kitchen, stuffed cabbage rolls were a labor of love that stretched a modest amount of ground meat into a meal that could feed the whole family. Tender cabbage leaves were carefully blanched and wrapped around a mixture of beef, rice, onions, and seasonings, then simmered in a tangy tomato sauce until everything melded into a comforting, hearty dish. It wasn't fast, but it was practical. A way to make a little meat go a long way while sneaking in vegetables and flavor that even picky eaters could tolerate. For many families, these rolls carried the legacy of immigrant kitchens and traditions adapted to the American pantry. Canned tomato sauce, a bit of sugar, and a pinch of paprika or Worcestershire sauce transformed simple ingredients into something warm and satisfying. Moms learned that a tight grocery budget didn't have to mean bland meals. The magic was in the folding, the simmering, and the patience to let flavors develop while the oven hummed or the stove bubbled. Stuffed cabbage rolls were more than just dinner. They were a centerpiece. Served on a plate with mashed potatoes or a slice of buttered bread, they symbolized care, frugality, and the kind of meals that brought the family together. Leftovers often tasted even better the next day. The flavors deepened and melded in a way that felt almost luxurious considering how inexpensive the dish really was. Even today, these rolls hold nostalgic charm. Whether served at a Sunday dinner or revisited as a retro recipe, stuffed cabbage rolls remind us that frugality can coexist with flavor, and that a little patience, love, and clever cooking can turn humble ingredients into a meal worth remembering. Fried bologna sandwiches.
A fried bologna sandwich.
Few meals from the 1950s capture the spirit of frugality and simplicity like the fried bologna sandwich. It was the kind of dinner that required almost nothing more than a skillet, a slice of bologna, and a loaf of white bread. And yet it had a way of feeling like a treat. The bologna, sliced thick or thin depending on preference, sizzled in a little butter until the edges curled and browned, releasing a salty, smoky aroma that made mouths water long before it hit the plate. Moms loved it for its speed and affordability, while kids loved it for its unmistakable flavor and easy-to-hold format. Some families added a slice of cheese, a dab of mustard or mayonnaise, or even a quick topping of fried onions to elevate the experience. But at its heart, It was about the crispy, savory bologna and the soft, warm bread that held it all together. It was a meal that required no complicated recipes, no long shopping lists, just a little creativity with what was already in the kitchen. Fried bologna sandwiches weren't just about feeding a family on a budget. They were a slice of home life, a moment of quick comfort that reminded everyone that good meals didn't need to be elaborate. Paired with a glass of milk or a side of chips, they were a weekday staple and a nostalgic favorite for decades. Even now, they hold a certain retro charm. Whether served at a picnic, a casual dinner, or remembered fondly from childhood, fried bologna sandwiches are proof that frugal ingredients, a hot skillet, and a bit of love can turn the simplest food into a meal worth savoring. Egg salad on white bread. There was a quiet genius to the 1950s: egg salad on white bread. It was simple, affordable, and endlessly adaptable. The kind of lunch or supper that could be made in minutes with ingredients already on hand. Hard-boiled eggs were chopped and mixed with mayonnaise, a touch of mustard, and a sprinkle of salt and pepper, transforming humble eggs into a creamy, flavorful filling. Spread thick between slices of soft white bread, it became a sandwich that felt more like a treat than a budget meal. For many families, egg salad was a go-to for quick weekday dinners or lunch boxes. Leftover boiled eggs from breakfast or Sunday brunch could be repurposed effortlessly, stretching the meal while still tasting fresh and satisfying. Some homemakers added a dash of paprika or chopped celery for crunch, while others kept it classic, relying on the simple flavors to shine. It was a dish that balanced convenience and care, perfect for households trying to feed hungry kids without stretching the grocery budget too thin. Egg salad on white bread wasn't just food, it was a small moment of comfort. The soft bread, creamy filling, and mild tang of mustard brought a sense of home to the table, whether eaten hot off the knife or wrapped in wax paper for a packed lunch. It reminded families that nourishing, filling meals didn't need to be elaborate, just thoughtfully prepared. Today, the sandwich remains a nostalgic favorite. Its simplicity continues to charm, proving that even the most basic ingredients, eggs, mayonnaise, and bread, can create something satisfying, comforting, and timeless. Egg salad on white bread is a little piece of 1950s culinary wisdom that still has a place at modern tables. Homemade chicken pot pie. Few dishes embody 1950s home cooking quite like homemade chicken pot pie. It was the ultimate comfort food, a golden, flaky pastry encasing a creamy filling of chicken, vegetables, and rich sauce, a dish that made even modest ingredients feel luxurious. Leftover chicken from Sunday dinner or a simple rotisserie bird could be transformed into a hearty meal for the family, stretched with carrots, peas, and potatoes to make every bite satisfying and frugal. The magic was in the assembly. A simple roux of butter, flour, and milk created a silky sauce, enveloping tender chunks of chicken and a mix of whatever vegetables were on hand. All of it was tucked under a homemade or pre-made pastry crust, the edges crimped neatly, ready to bake until golden and bubbling. The aroma alone promised warmth and nourishment, calling families from across the house to the dinner table. Chicken pot pie wasn't just a meal, it was a statement of care. It showcased resourcefulness, turning leftovers into something new and exciting, and reminded families that even on a tight budget, a home-cooked dinner could feel special. Kids loved lifting the crust to reach the creamy filling inside, while parents appreciated the ease of preparing a one-dish meal that fed everyone. Today, homemade chicken pot pie retains its nostalgic charm. While modern recipes might incorporate shortcuts or gourmet twists, the essence remains: A comforting, hearty, and satisfying meal that celebrates ingenuity in the kitchen. Homemade chicken pot pie is proof that frugal cooking can be indulgent, filling, and timeless. A legacy from 1950s kitchens that still warms hearts and bellies alike. Pork chops with applesauce. Few meals capture the essence of 1950s family dinners like pork chops with applesauce. It was a dish that combined simplicity, flavor, and frugality, turning inexpensive cuts of pork into a hearty, satisfying supper. The chops, usually pan-fried or baked until golden and juicy, paired perfectly with the sweet, smooth applesauce, a combination that was both comforting and approachable for kids and adults alike. For many homemakers, it was a reliable weeknight meal that required minimal ingredients but delivered maximum satisfaction. The charm of this dish lay in its balance. The savory richness of the pork played against the natural sweetness of applesauce, creating a flavor contrast that felt elegant without any extra effort. Often, a simple seasoning of salt, pepper, and a touch of paprika was all that was needed to bring out the meat's natural flavor. Some families served it alongside mashed potatoes or buttered vegetables, turning a small meal into a complete homey dinner. Beyond the taste, pork chops with applesauce represented practicality and care. It made the most of pantry staples and affordable meats, while still giving the impression of a thoughtful, well-prepared meal. Children might have reluctantly tolerated the pork at first bite, but the familiar sweetness of applesauce usually won them over. Today, the dish endures as a nostalgic reminder of mid-century kitchens where simplicity met ingenuity. Modern cooks may experiment with roasted apples or cider glazes, but the heart of the meal remains unchanged. A juicy pork chop, a spoonful of sweet applesauce, and a sense of home. Pork chops with applesauce is proof that classic comfort food doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be made with a little love and a lot of practicality. Oven-baked rice pudding. In the 1950s kitchen, oven-baked rice pudding was the ultimate frugal dessert and a cozy way to end any meal. Using pantry staples like rice, milk, sugar, and a touch of butter or vanilla, homemakers could create a sweet, creamy treat that stretched far enough to serve the whole family. It was easy to make, required little supervision, and produced that comforting aroma of warm milk and cinnamon that seemed to hug the entire house. The magic of baked rice pudding was in its simplicity. Short grain rice absorbed the liquid slowly in the oven, swelling into a tender, custardy texture, while a sprinkle of nutmeg or cinnamon on top added both color and fragrant spice. Some families stirred in raisins or a handful of nuts for extra texture, but the dish worked just as well on its own. Served warm or chilled, it was versatile enough for weekday dinners or a sweet end to Sunday supper. Rice pudding was more than a dessert. It was a lesson in resourcefulness. Leftover rice from earlier meals could easily become the base for a new dish, turning a modest amount of ingredients into something special. Moms could feed the family something comforting and sweet without breaking the grocery budget, making it a staple in mid-century American homes. Even today, oven-baked rice pudding evokes nostalgia for a simpler time. Its creamy, slightly caramelized surface and soft, yielding interior remain timeless. This humble dessert proves that with just a few basic ingredients and a little patience, you can create something that warms both the stomach and the heart. A delicious echo of 1950s home cooking that continues to delight generations. Vegetable soup from leftovers. Few dishes embody the resourcefulness of 1950s home cooking like vegetable soup from leftovers. It was a meal born out of necessity, creativity, and a desire to stretch every bit of produce and pantry staples into something nourishing. Every pot was different, depending on what the fridge held. A few carrots here, a stalk of celery there, maybe a handful of frozen peas or a can of tomatoes. With a simple broth, a pinch of salt, and a dash of herbs, these humble scraps transformed into a warm, flavorful soup that could feed an entire family. The beauty of this dish was its flexibility. Leftover potatoes, cabbage, or green beans could all find new life simmering together, often with a little noodle or rice added for extra heartiness. For many households, vegetable soup wasn't just a starter, it was a complete dinner, served with buttered bread or crackers on the side. It was economical, wholesome, and comforting, a reminder that nothing edible should go to waste and that ingenuity in the kitchen could turn scarcity into abundance. Beyond its practicality, vegetable soup from leftovers carried a sense of care and tradition. It reflected the rhythm of family life in the 1950s, using what was available, feeding everyone well, and creating a meal that warmed both the body and the heart. Each simmering pot was a testament to frugality, creativity, and love. Today, this simple soup remains a nostalgic favorite. Modern cooks might throw in stock cubes or fresh herbs, but the spirit remains unchanged. A delicious, economical way to transform scraps into something satisfying. Vegetable soup from leftovers proves that comfort and flavor don't need to come from expensive ingredients, just a thoughtful hand and a bit of patience. Sausage and biscuit supper bake. There was something irresistibly hearty about a 1950s sausage and biscuit supper bake. It was the kind of meal that combined convenience, frugality, and comfort all in one dish. Ground or sliced sausage was browned and layered in a baking dish, sometimes mixed with vegetables, cheese, or a simple gravy, then topped with biscuit dough, either from scratch or a pre-made mix. As it baked, the biscuits puffed up golden and fluffy, soaking up the savory flavors beneath, while the aroma of sausage and butter filled the kitchen, calling everyone to the table. For busy families, this casserole was a lifesaver. It was easy to prepare, economical, and could feed a crowd with minimal fuss. Leftover biscuits or frozen rolls could be pressed into service, and the sausage could be swapped for whatever protein was on hand, making it a flexible option for weeknight dinners. It offered the comforting combination of carbs and protein that kids loved and parents appreciated, especially when time and money were tight. The appeal wasn't just in its taste, it was the sense of home and warmth it brought. Families gathered around the table, cutting through layers of golden biscuit to reach the savory, hearty filling beneath. It was filling, satisfying, and made everyone feel cared for. The essence of mid-century family cooking. Even today, sausage and biscuit supper bake carries its nostalgic charm. Modern cooks might add cheese, herbs, or a splash of cream, but the heart of the dish remains the same. A practical, flavorful, and comforting meal that turns simple ingredients into a crowd-pleasing supper. It's a delicious reminder that sometimes the easiest dishes bring the most joy. Jello salad with suspiciously savory add-ins. The infamous 1950s Jello salad. A dish that could make you question what exactly belonged in a dessert and what didn't. Brightly colored, wobbly, and almost festive in appearance, it often included ingredients that modern palates might find puzzling: canned vegetables, chopped fruit, and even bits of cottage cheese or cooked meat suspended in that shimmering gelatin. Yet, at the time, it was considered the height of culinary creativity, a way for homemakers to showcase both flair and frugality at family dinners or church potlucks. The preparation was deceptively simple. Powdered gelatin dissolved in hot water, chilled until slightly thickened, and then folded around whatever additions the cook had on hand. A can of fruit cocktail or pineapple chunks added sweetness, shredded carrot or celery brought texture, and occasionally, for the adventurous or budget-conscious, a bit of diced cooked meat or hard-boiled egg would find its way in. Once set in the fridge, it jiggled onto the plate like a colorful, wobbly sculpture, Not everyone's first choice, but undeniably iconic. Despite its sometimes controversial combination of flavors, Jello salad represented ingenuity and a desire to make meals festive. It was inexpensive, shelf-stable, and could turn a simple dinner into a conversation starter. Children often poked at the weird shapes with both curiosity and caution, while adults admired the creativity, or at least tolerated it politely. Today, Jello salad evokes laughter and nostalgia in equal measure. While the modern version might stick to fruit and whipped cream, the original reminds us of a time when experimentation in the kitchen was encouraged and presentation mattered almost as much as taste. Jello salad with suspiciously savory add-ins is a wobbly, colorful testament to the inventiveness and sometimes questionable judgment of 1950s home cooking. Hamburger gravy over mashed potatoes. Few meals capture the essence of 1950s comfort food quite like hamburger gravy over mashed potatoes. It was a dish that combined frugality with warmth, transforming inexpensive ground beef into a rich, savory sauce that blanketed a mound of fluffy, buttery potatoes. For busy families on a budget, it was both hearty and simple, a go-to weeknight dinner that satisfied hungry kids and parents alike. The smell of onions sizzling in a skillet and gravy thickening with flour and milk could draw the whole household to the table before the plates were even served. The magic of this dish was in its clever stretching. Ground beef, browned with onions and seasoned with a touch of salt and pepper, was simmered with a simple roux or gravy base until thick and flavorful. Served atop creamy mashed potatoes, it turned a modest meal into something indulgent without breaking the grocery budget. Leftover gravy could even be refrigerated for the next day, ready to pour over bread or rice, making it a versatile staple in the 1950s kitchen. Hamburger gravy over mashed potatoes was more than just dinner. It was a symbol of care and practicality. It reflected the post-war era's focus on feeding the family well while making every ingredient count. Children loved the creamy, hearty combination, and parents appreciated a dish that was quick, reliable, and comforting all at once. Even today, it evokes nostalgia for home-cooked meals and simple pleasures. Modern adaptations might add mushrooms or a splash of Worcestershire sauce, but the essence remains unchanged. A savory, satisfying dish that embodies frugality, flavor, and the enduring appeal of a warm plate served straight from the heart of the kitchen. Cabbage and noodles, Haluski style. Cabbage and noodles, or Haluski as it was lovingly called in many 1950s kitchens, was a humble yet hearty dish that showcased how simple ingredients could create something deeply satisfying. Wide egg noodles were tossed with sautéed cabbage, butter, and onions until everything was soft, fragrant, and golden, often finished with a touch of salt and pepper. For families watching the grocery budget, it was a filling meal that required little more than pantry staples, yet it carried a warmth and comfort that made it feel like more than the sum of its parts. This dish often served as a side, complementing meats like pork chops or sausages, but it could easily stand on its own as a vegetarian-friendly dinner when resources were tight. The magic was in the technique, sautéing the cabbage slowly to bring out its natural sweetness, tossing it with noodles until they absorb the buttery flavor, and occasionally adding a sprinkle of crispy bacon or a leftover fried meat for extra richness. Every bite was a gentle reminder of home, tradition, and the creativity of homemakers who turned inexpensive ingredients into memorable meals. Haluski wasn't just frugal, it was comforting and nostalgic. The simple aroma of cabbage and onions sizzling in butter evoked family kitchens filled with chatter, laughter, and the satisfaction of a well-cooked meal. It was a dish that could feed a crowd, stretch leftovers, and warm both bellies and hearts. Even today, cabbage and noodles remain a nostalgic favorite. Whether served at a family dinner or revisited by home cooks exploring classic recipes, it is a timeless example of how modest ingredients, simple preparation, and a bit of culinary know-how can create a meal that endures for generations. Corned beef hash. In the 1950s, corned beef hash was the ultimate quick and easy meal, turning a modest can of corned beef and leftover potatoes into a hearty, flavorful dinner or breakfast. Crispy edges and a tender interior made it irresistibly satisfying, especially when fried in a little butter until golden brown. Families loved it for its thriftiness, as it stretched inexpensive ingredients into a filling meal that could feed several mouths without much fuss. The preparation was straightforward but rewarding. Diced or shredded corned beef combined with chopped cooked potatoes, onions, and a pinch of salt and pepper created a savory mixture that sizzled in the skillet. Some cooks added a splash of Worcestershire sauce or a fried egg on top, elevating the humble hash into a complete, comforting dish. Leftover corned beef from a previous meal found new life here, demonstrating the ingenuity of homemakers who knew how to make every ingredient count. Corned beef hash wasn't just practical, it was nostalgia on a plate. Its smoky, salty flavor paired with the crispiness of fried potatoes became a family favorite, reminding everyone of warm kitchens, early mornings, or cozy weeknight suppers. Served with a side of bread or a simple salad, it represented the essence of 1950s home cooking: frugal, flavorful, and filling. Even today, corned beef hash retains its retro charm. Modern versions might add peppers, cheese, or fresh herbs, but the classic combination of corned beef, potatoes, and onions remains timeless. It's a dish that proves comfort doesn't have to be complicated, and that sometimes the simplest meals leave the most lasting memories. Salmon patties with cream sauce. In the 1950s, salmon patties with cream sauce were a staple for families looking for a frugal yet satisfying dinner. Canned salmon, often with the bones finely mashed for added calcium, was combined with breadcrumbs, egg, and a touch of seasoning to form patties that could be pan-fried to golden perfection. The patties were simple, quick to make, and stretched enough to feed a family on a budget, yet they delivered a hearty, flavorful bite that felt far more special than their humble ingredients suggested. The magic came when these golden patties met a creamy white sauce. Butter, flour, and milk transformed into a luscious topping that added richness and comfort to each plate. Sometimes a squeeze of lemon or a sprinkle of dill enhanced the flavor, turning pantry staples into a dish that could grace the family table any night of the week. Served with mashed potatoes, steamed vegetables, or even over toast, salmon patties with cream sauce were versatile, filling, and always appreciated. Beyond their practicality, these patties reflected the resourcefulness of mid-century homemakers. Leftover salmon, a few simple seasonings, and basic kitchen staples became a meal that was nutritious, affordable, and comforting. Children might have been hesitant at first bite, but the golden crust and creamy sauce usually won them over. Today, salmon patties with cream sauce remain a nostalgic nod to 1950s kitchens. While modern cooks may experiment with fresh herbs, capers, or lightened sauces, the heart of the dish, frugal, flavorful, and comforting, stays the same. It's a reminder that inventive cooking and simple ingredients can create meals that are both memorable and timeless. Chipped ham barbecue sandwiches. Few mid-century meals were as beloved in the 1950s as chipped ham barbecue sandwiches. Thinly sliced or chopped ham from the deli counter became the base for a quick, flavorful meal that could stretch a small amount of meat to feed a hungry family. Mixed with a tangy, sweet barbecue sauce and piled high on soft hamburger buns or white bread, these sandwiches were both comforting and practical, perfect for busy weeknights or casual gatherings. The appeal of chipped ham lay in its versatility. A little butter or a touch of mustard could enhance the flavor, while the barbecue sauce added a smoky, savory sweetness that made every bite satisfying. Kids loved the gooey, sticky goodness, and parents appreciated how a modest ingredient could turn into a substantial, filling meal. Some families even added pickles or cheese for extra flair, demonstrating how a simple recipe could be adapted to taste and budget. Beyond flavor, these sandwiches reflected 1950s ingenuity and thrift. Using inexpensive deli meat meant that no slice of ham went to waste, and the sandwiches could easily be accompanied by chips, coleslaw, or a simple salad to round out the meal. It was a dish that combined convenience, taste, and economy, a trifecta of mid-century home cooking. Even today, chipped ham barbecue sandwiches carry nostalgic charm. Modern versions might feature artisan buns or homemade sauce, but the essence remains: a quick, satisfying meal built on frugality, flavor, and practicality. They remind us that even the simplest ingredients, when handled with a bit of creativity and care, can become a family favorite that stands the test of time. Biscuits and sausage gravy. Few breakfasts capture the essence of 1950s comfort food quite like biscuits and sausage gravy. Fluffy, buttery biscuits served hot from the oven were smothered in a creamy, peppery gravy made from crumbled breakfast sausage, milk, and a simple roux. A combination that was as hearty as it was satisfying. It was a dish that could stretch inexpensive ingredients into a meal that fed the whole family, offering both warmth and flavor in every bite. The preparation was straightforward but rewarding. Sausage was browned in a skillet, then combined with the butter and flour roux to form the base of the gravy. Milk was added slowly, thickening into a smooth, velvety sauce, seasoned generously with black pepper for a gentle kick. Biscuits, whether homemade or from a mix, were split open and generously ladled with the sausage gravy, creating a plateful of comfort that quickly became a household favorite. Beyond its practicality, this dish represented the care and ingenuity of mid-century homemakers. It was inexpensive, quick enough for a busy morning, and satisfying enough to keep everyone fueled for the day ahead. Children loved tearing into the soft biscuits, savoring the rich, savory gravy, while parents appreciated the simplicity and reliability of the meal. Even today, biscuits and sausage gravy retains its nostalgic charm. Modern cooks might add herbs or spice variations, but the heart of the dish remains the same: a comforting, filling breakfast that speaks to tradition, thrift, and the simple pleasures of 1950s home cooking. It's proof that even humble ingredients, when prepared with care, can create a meal that endures for generations. Baked beans with brown sugar and bacon. Few side dishes evoke the cozy warmth of a 1950s kitchen quite like baked beans with brown sugar and bacon. A humble can of beans could be transformed into a sweet and savory delight, simmered slowly with brown sugar, bits of bacon, and a touch of mustard or molasses for depth. The result was a dish that was hearty, flavorful, and inexpensive, perfect for feeding the whole family alongside cornbread, hot dogs, or a simple roast. The beauty of this recipe was in its simplicity and adaptability. Bacon added smoky richness, while the brown sugar caramelized slightly as the beans baked, creating a luscious, sticky glaze that clung to each bean. Some families tossed in chopped onions or a splash of ketchup to enhance the flavor, but even the basic combination delivered satisfying comfort and warmth with minimal effort. It was the kind of dish that could simmer on the stove or bake in the oven while other parts of the meal were prepared, filling the house with a sweet, savory aroma that made everyone eager to sit down at the table. Beyond taste, baked beans were a testament to frugality and resourcefulness. They stretched small amounts of meat and pantry staples into a meal that could feed multiple people without breaking the grocery budget. For children, the sticky sweetness was irresistible, while parents appreciated the ease and reliability of a dish that could accompany nearly any main course. Even today, baked beans with brown sugar and bacon remain a nostalgic favorite. Modern cooks might experiment with smoked paprika, maple syrup, or fresh herbs, but the essence remains the same: a comforting, versatile, and economical dish that warms the kitchen and the heart, just as it did in 1950s homes. Mock apple pie made without apples. Few desserts from the 1950s showcase both ingenuity and thrift like mock apple pie. Despite its name, this pie contained no apples at all. Instead, a clever combination of crackers, sugar, and spices was used to mimic the flavor and texture of a traditional apple pie. Saltine crackers, softened and layered with cinnamon, sugar, and a touch of lemon, created a surprisingly convincing filling, all encased in a flaky pastry crust that baked golden and fragrant. It was a dessert that turned pantry staples into a family favorite, proving that creativity in the kitchen could triumph over scarcity. The charm of mock apple pie was in its simplicity and resourcefulness. Homemakers could create a sweet, satisfying dessert with ingredients that were inexpensive and often already on hand, making it perfect for mid-century households looking to stretch their grocery dollars. The crust, whether homemade or store-bought, added a buttery balance to the sweet, spiced filling, while a sprinkle of cinnamon or a dollop of whipped cream elevated the dish into something truly special. This pie wasn't just practical. It was a testament to frugality and ingenuity. Children often marveled at how something so delicious could be made without actual apples, while parents appreciated the clever use of common ingredients to make a dessert that felt indulgent. It turned simple meals into memorable occasions and reflected the creativity and resilience of 1950s home cooking. Even today, mock apple pie carries a nostalgic charm. Modern cooks may experiment with alternative crusts or subtle flavor twists, but the essence remains unchanged: a resourceful, sweet, and surprisingly convincing dessert that reminds us how imagination and thrift can create something timeless and delicious. As we wrap up our look at 30 meals every 1950s family cooked on a tight budget, it's clear that frugality and creativity went hand in hand in mid-century kitchens. These simple, hearty dishes remind us that great meals don't have to be complicated or expensive. If you enjoyed this nostalgic journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more timeless recipes and kitchen stories. And we'd love to hear from you. Which 1950s favorite would you try at your table?